I'm going to take just a moment and ask you to think to yourself, because we're going to talk about club visioning now. I'd ask you to think to yourself, if you had a time machine that would work only once, where in the future or the past would you travel and why? So just take a moment and think about that. I want to get a couple answers from throughout the room. Okay, let me get a couple answers from throughout the room. Sandy, do you have an answer?
Sure. I would like to go back to the 60s.
Dare I ask why? Why would you like to go back to the 60s?
Because it was a much simpler time.
Amen.
Frankie?
Egypt to see the pyramids being built.
So you want to see the pyramids being built, okay. And why is that? Because it fascinates you. Okay. Anyone with an actual event, I would go back to this event in this period of time, perhaps in my life or in someone else's life. Garrett?
Yep. I'd go back to when I was 20 years old and I'd tell myself how to become rich fast.
So Garrett is going to go back to when he was 20, and he would share his infinite wisdom he has now on how to become rich fast. So, Frankie said, please share that info with her if you have it now. You know, the point of that exercise was kind of to wonder, is there anything that could have been done differently that would have changed the outcome of today had you gone back to that time period? Sandy said that she wanted to go back to the 60s because it was a simpler time. What were the decisions that were made between now and then that made life more difficult? So, and the hecklers started.
That must have been Garrett, right?
No! Garrett and Rebecca, you may have to sit in the hallway.
Everything he just tires changed.
So, another story that I've...
Now we know why they tore down your meeting place.
Started Garrett.
You don't know the guys who left Rotary want that.
Another strategic planning or visioning story that I like to share, and I shared it, I believe, at Pat's. In fact, I've shared it many times, and I always refer to the cat as a cheeky cat, which really angers my wife for some reason, so I won't do that today. But in Alice in Wonderland, you have Alice who comes across the cat, and she asks for directions. She says, what way am I supposed to go? And the cat says, essentially, where are you trying to go? And she says, I'm not real sure. And the cat replies by saying, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. And isn't that true in our organizations as well? If we don't know what our final destination is, then what does it matter what path or road we take, what decision we make, how we plan our budget? It really doesn't matter because we don't know where we want to go or what our final outcome is going to be. Today, the objectives that we're going to kind of highlight are the importance of strategic planning, steps involved in developing a strategic plan, and then just briefly, we're going to touch on staying competitive. And someone today was already harassing the Lions, so we're going to talk a little bit about that competitive nature. Now, why should clubs plan? They want to plan primarily so that they can set direction and priorities. You want to plan so that you can get everyone on the same page. You want to plan to simplify decision making. Because if you have a plan in mind, and then a decision comes down the line, you already know your end destination. So just like Alice, you know what path you're going to be able to take. It also drives alignment. It puts everyone moving in the same direction. And how often in our clubs do we have different groups moving in different directions? Who has seating in their club where everyone sits in their own seat with their own people every week? Okay, it happens pretty naturally. And those little groups, they kind of form a sect within our club, and they all may move in a different direction. You know, it's kind of funny at my club, and I love my club. I think they're, you get yelled at for saying this, probably the best club in our district. If not, I wouldn't be a member there. I won't tell you where I'd go, but I wouldn't be a member there. It's funny how the table seatings also end up being the people working on different projects. So there's one table that is really focused on scholarships. That's great. We need those worker bees to take care of our scholarship program. But we have another table that deals with our foundation. We have another table that deals with our different projects and a lot of fundraising. So they kind of work within their own groups, but they're not always working in the same direction. So alignment would help us within our club as well. And then to communicate the message. And not just internally, but also externally. Because many times we have a guest at our Rotary Club, and they say, well, what does your club do? And they may get 20 different answers from the 20 different people in the room. Or you'll have so many bullet points whenever you're trying to tell them that it was a passing question, and they need to be in a meeting in 45 minutes, and you've taken up 20 to tell them what your club does. So if you're in Mary's session later today, I'm sure she'll be talking about how we talk about Rotary and helping you to refine that. But a strategic plan helps you to communicate that message because you know these are our goals and objectives, boom, 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 and this is what we're working to try to accomplish. You know, I came across a cartoon, and it is a group of people at a strategic planning meeting. And this is why I call this visioning whenever I send it out in advance, because when you call it strategic planning, people get kind of overwhelmed. And sometimes strategic planning in a room starts out with a conversation something like this. And so the first person says, what's the agenda today? And someone says, well, before we set the agenda, we need to determine our goals for the meeting. The next person says, before we set goals, we need our core strategy for determining them. And then the next person says, first we should plan a strategy for strategically planning our planning process to determine our goals. So that is bureaucracy at its best, but that sometimes happens when we start to strategically plan. But if you really delve down into it at a very simple level, you'll realize that it doesn't have to be this complex. We're going to give you some step-by-step directions, and this afternoon Ken is going to go through the beginning process with you on how you can plan for your club throughout the next year. You know, what is a strategic plan? We've already been talking about it. It's a systematic approach through which an organization agrees on priorities that are essential to its mission and responsive to its environment. It's data-based, and it guides resource acquisition and allocation. And finally, it builds commitment. You know, one of my favorite pieces is in that first bullet point. And that says it's a systematic approach through which an organization agrees on priorities that are essential to its mission. And I always refer to organizations as being mission-driven. So you come down to why we exist. What is at the very DNA, at the heart and soul of our organization? Why do we meet as a Rotary Club? Is it just because we have lunch together and we enjoy each other? Or is it because we do these projects together? Once you've clearly defined that, every other decision you make can be made based on that mission. What does our club do? Why do we exist? And then you'll start to find that some of the things that we spend a lot of time in board meetings discussing really don't matter that much because it's not a mission-driven decision. What strategic planning is not is a prediction for the future, a smooth, predictable, linear process, a substitute for judgment of leadership. You still have to have the ability to make judgment calls whenever you are serving in any leadership position. Now, some keys to effective planning are to focus on the most important issues, to be willing to question the status quo, to produce some sort of a document, and Ken's going to help you with that this afternoon, but it can be a short document. It doesn't have to be anything overwhelming. It very well could be one page or front and back. and then translate into an annual operating plan. So as you're starting to put things together, you want to be able to make sure you look at your strategic plan and say, this is how we're going to operate, not just for 1 year, but for year to year to year. Now, that document we were talking about, I just mentioned that it could be short and simple. The format should be easy. It needs to be long enough to give guidance, but not so long that nobody will read it. I came across another cartoon that I thought was appropriate to fit in there. And this cartoon is dealing with the Antiques Roadshow. Now, if you know our district assistant, Dave Sassard, he registers to go see the Antiques Roadshow anytime it's within a 3 to 4 to 5 hour drive. And I don't know what he has in his basement that he wants to take there, but I'm dying to get my hands on it. So this is the Antiques Roadshow, and the woman has brought in a collection of strategic plan books. And I work in a nonprofit, and our old strategic plan books are sometimes much like this. They sit on the shelf, and they're in binders, but hers are in excellent condition. So the gentleman looks at it and he says, and these are in mint condition. It's obvious that they were never read or implemented. And then he says, because unimplemented plans are commonplace, your set is worth nothing, though it is a good source for recycled paper. So basically the gist is that a lot of people put together plans but never use them, and one of the key reasons is back to that document. They're just simply too long or they look at too much. I wanted to talk just a moment or two about Rotary International strategic plan, because it's really making some changes in how we do business on an international level. Rotary's strategic plan was built using feedback from Rotarians and is key to finding its key findings from external research. Now, there's 3 major priorities that are highlighted through the strategic plan, and it's support and strengthening clubs, focus and increase on humanitarian service, and then to enhance public awareness and image. Just a quick aside, there were over 67,000 Rotarians who were asked to participate. 15% of them did participate when asked questions, and the rate was large enough for them to consider it a good sample to formulate the plan on. This survey was 2014, and it provided feedback on support for the current strategic plan, issues that Rotarians thought were important in 10 years or so, participation in strategic planning at club and district level, relevance of the strategic plan to Rotary and its clubs, and then implementation of the strategic plan. There were some areas of strength that were adopted, and we're going to be asking you to look for areas of strength within your individual clubs. And there may be some overlap between RI's areas of strength in your clubs, but what was said of RI is that there is some consistency of views on priorities and goals, increased awareness on the importance of club planning, Rotarians' recommendation of our organization, support for new grants model and the sustainability, high level of pride about campaign to end polio, and agreement with strengthening Rotary initiatives. So those were our strengths. Our opportunities, which is a nice word for weaknesses, is concerns about the decline in membership. And I know a lot of our clubs are dealing with that or looking at that. Continuing concerns about our public image and public awareness. Perception of insufficient diversity. Lack of awareness of the new online tools. If you don't know, we have new online tools, and they really are great and can help you in running a club, but there's just not the awareness level, so we're trying to work towards that. Frustration with old-fashioned processes. Slow pace of change. We are an organization that is kind of like a dinosaur. We move extremely slow, like a Sunday driver sometimes. But I think that's starting to change. And then emerging concerns regarding financial stability. You know, we mentioned by age, and this is a breakdown that I thought was good to share with you before you do any planning within your clubs, because it is age-based. Now, this is worldwide percentages, and you will see the different categories. Our 29 and younger Rotarians make up only 1%, with our 30 to 39-year-old Rotarians making up just 9%. So only 10% of our organization is under 40 years old. And that's where there's a little bit of concern about age diversity. Now that doesn't mean that there's not great value to our Rotarians who have been around for a while. I believe the term we use now is maybe seasoned or something of that nature. Experience. But it's not to say that they're not important, it's just that we always have to be cultivating a new group to be coming in to move our organization along. Now, the next question that was asked was, does your club have a strategic plan? They asked this in 2009, 2012, 2014. In 2009, only 7% of clubs did. 2012 was kind of the pinnacle where we had 27, and then we dropped down to 21% in 2014. And actually, I just read you the column that says don't know. So those were the clubs that didn't know if they had a strategic plan or not. The clubs that did were 44 in 2009, in 2012 41, and 45% in 2014. So just under half right now. But with that being said, you had 21% that said that they didn't know. The final numbers that I'll share with you from the strategic plan is the importance of having a strategic plan. And if you look in 2014, 48% of the respondents said it was very important for a district to have a strategic plan, and 47% said that it was very important for a club to have a strategic plan. And then at the bottom of that slide, it shows you the satisfaction, basically, because they asked a question, do you strongly agree or agree on questions about member experience? And clubs that had a strategic plan, 63% of the respondents said that they agreed or strongly agreed that they had a positive experience within Rotary. So it shows a direct correlation to our overall success with our member experience. You know, they're working diligently to build a framework for defining Rotary's future success in 4 key areas: stronger, more effective clubs, greater impact, increased financial stability, and greater visibility and influence. And this afternoon, we're going to be looking at that for our own club, and we're going to be using a process starting with the question, where are we now? Then we'll move on to where do we want to be? How do we get there? And then the hard part, and this is the question we have to ask for the entire length of the plan, is how are we doing? Now, why does our club need to plan? You may tell me that you have a club that functions without any hiccups. They're excellent. They are, they're just really an outstanding club, and they have all of their ideas together. And I'm always kind of reminded of a quote, and I'm not sure who said it, but it's plastered up on billboards and different things. And that quote is, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. So it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, so even if your club is functioning at its pinnacle right now, that could change at some point in time in the future. So some additional resources, and I'm not going to read them to you, but there are some additional resources for Rotary clubs to do planning. We're going to share a couple of them with you throughout your sessions today, but they can all be found at rotary.org. The final thing that I want to share with you about planning is the idea of benchmarking. Benchmarking is used when standards and goals are set for your organization. One of the benchmarks that we're using this year internally is a balanced scorecard. And a balanced scorecard approach is something that a lot of Fortune 500 companies have gone to recently. You'll notice that our balanced scorecard for this year within our district is broken up into the areas of service. And it's too small for you to read, but you'll receive one this afternoon, either in one of your sessions or when you come back here for our guided planning period. But there's a number of different ways that you can benchmark on how well your club is doing through this scorecard approach. And it's important that when you start a strategic plan that you know how long are our benchmarks going to be in place so that you can so that you can gauge your club over a period of time and kind of see if your club is improving in any of these benchmark areas. There are 3 different qualifications because we have some awards at the end of the year that we'll be giving based on this balanced scorecard. And that is a silver, gold, and crystal. So many of you may be familiar with the Governor's Crystal Citation. Our crystal level clubs, if you've achieved that on the scorecard, will receive our crystal citation. And we'll also be giving an award for our gold clubs and our silver clubs. If a club is unable to earn any one of those categories, if you can't earn any of the 3, then you probably need to sit down and do a little planning and say, why aren't we able to achieve to that level? And that will help with a lot of different people in identifying clubs that may have some long-term problems. So I said I'd talk just a little bit about staying competitive. And whenever I started putting this together, I was looking at other presentations that people had done about strategic planning, and I borrowed from 4 or 5 different ones. But staying competitive was an item that was in a for-profit presentation where a business was working with their executive staff to say, who are our competition? But as I thought about it, I thought that's an important concept for us to use as well, even though we're a nonprofit, even though we're Rotary, because there's a lot of competition for a very finite resource, and that's people's time. So we have to make sure that our member experience and our return on investment, to use a term that's used often in the business world, is so high that we blow our competition out of the water. Now, I don't say that to say that it's negative to be a Kiwanian or a Lion or a member of any of those other service organizations. I'm simply saying if we want to grow our organization, we need to make sure that we know our competition and that we're able to stay competitive. Change may be outlined by a few, but it can't be achieved without working together as a whole. So as we do our planning today and we take it back, we need to engage our clubs and make sure that everyone in our club is on board and together with the plan. We need to develop some clearly written objectives for implementation because that's how we're able to share that with a group of people. When any team is rowing and their oars are going in the same direction, they're going to be propelled forward. And that's what we're hoping happens with your Rotary Club, that you get all of your rowers, all of your club members going the same direction and are engaged and working towards a common goal. Because only then can we pull the Rotary boat forward.